My name is Julius, and I am 67 years old. I am standing here at Oak Hill Cemetery, looking down at my son's casket, and my hands will not stop shaking. Daniel was only 42. He was supposed to bury me, not the other way around. The autumn wind cuts through my old suit jacket, but I barely feel it. All I feel is this hole in my chest where my heart used to be. Then Karen, my daughter-in-law, walks up beside me. Her eyes are dry. Her voice is ice cold. She leans in and whispers, "Stop crying. Pack your bags and get out of my house. Today." Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your city in the comments below. If you believe that families should treat each other with love and respect, hit that like button right now. And if you want to hear how one old man found his dignity again after losing everything, subscribe and stay with me. This is a story 40 years in the making. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what kind of life I lived before you can understand what Karen's words did to me that day at the cemetery. I grew up in a small town outside of Cleveland, Ohio. We did not have much. My father worked at a steel mill until his back gave out when I was 12 years old. 2 years later, he passed away from complications nobody could afford to treat. My mother took a job at the textile factory on the edge of town, working double shifts just to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. I was 14 when I became the man of the house. That was not a choice. That was just how things were in those days. You did what needed to be done. I started working odd jobs after school, mowing lawns in summer, shoveling driveways in winter, anything that would put a few dollars in my pocket to help my mother with the bills. By the time I turned 16, I made a decision that changed the course of my life. I dropped out of high school. My mother cried when I told her. She begged me to reconsider. But I had done the math in my head 100 times, and the numbers never added up. We needed money more than I needed a diploma. I worked construction through my late teens. I learned how to lay bricks, pour concrete, and frame houses. My hands grew calloused. My back grew strong. I learned that a man's worth was measured by his willingness to show up every single day, no matter how tired he was, no matter how much his body ached. At 21, I got my commercial driving license and started hauling freight across the Midwest. Long hours on empty highways, truck stop coffee at 3 in the morning, sleeping in the cab when I could not afford a motel room. But the pay was better, and I was saving every penny I could. Then, when I was 23 years old, everything changed. I walked into a little diner called Rosie's just outside of Columbus. I was dirty from the road, tired from driving 14 hours straight, and probably smelled like diesel fuel. But the waitress who brought me my coffee did not seem to mind. Her name tag said Margaret. She had chestnut brown hair that fell just past her shoulders and the kindest blue eyes I had ever seen. When she smiled at me, I forgot how tired I was. I went back to that diner every chance I got. Sometimes I would drive an extra 50 miles just to stop there, even when it was not on my route. Margaret thought I was crazy at first. Maybe I was. But after 3 months of showing up with wildflowers I had picked from the roadside, she finally agreed to let me take her to dinner on her day off. We dated for 8 months. I proposed to her with a ring that cost me 2 months of savings. It was not much, just a small diamond on a thin gold band, but Margaret looked at it like I had given her the moon. Our wedding was simple, a small church on a hill, wooden pews, worn smooth by generations of worshipers. Maybe 20 people attended, mostly Margaret's family, and a few friends from my trucking days. My mother sat in the front row, crying happy tears for the first time in years. I made Margaret a promise that day. I told her I would give her and our future children a better life than I had. I would work harder than any man had ever worked before. I would make sure they never had to worry about where their next meal was coming from, or whether the heat would stay on in winter. 4 years later, our son Daniel was born. I still remember the moment the nurse placed him in my arms. He was so small, barely 7 pounds, with a tuft of dark hair and tiny fingers that wrapped around my thumb. I looked down at his face, and I felt something shift inside me. It was like my whole life suddenly had a purpose I had never understood before. I cried that day, not from sadness but from a joy so overwhelming I did not know how to contain it. Margaret laughed at me through her own tears. She said I was the toughest man she knew, and here I was crying over a baby. But she understood. She always understood. From that day forward, every decision I made was for Daniel. I took on extra shifts at the freight company. When they offered me a job at a steel mill closer to home, I took it even though the work was harder. At least I could be home every night to tuck my son into bed. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house on Maple Street. The roof leaked when it rained hard and the furnace wheezed like an old man in winter. But it was ours. Margaret made it a home with second-hand furniture and curtains she sewed herself. I never bought new clothes for myself in those years. Every spare dollar went into Daniel's college fund or new shoes when his feet grew or books for school. Margaret and I would sit at the kitchen table after Daniel went to bed, counting pennies and planning for a future we could barely see but desperately believed in. No matter how late I came home from work, I always stopped by Daniel's room. I would sit on the edge of his bed and read him a story, even if my eyes were so tired the words blurred on the page. Those moments were sacred to me. The smell of his shampoo, the way he would fight sleep just to hear one more chapter. The sound of his breathing when he finally drifted off. Daniel grew up smart and curious. He asked questions about everything, how engines worked, why the sky was blue, what made the stars shine. I did not always have the answers, but I loved that he asked. I loved that his mind was hungry for knowledge in a way mine never had the chance to be. When Daniel was 15, he told me he wanted to go to college. He wanted to study business, maybe finance. He had big dreams about working in a tall building in a big city somewhere. I looked at my son, already taller than me, with his mother's eyes and my stubborn chin, and I made him another promise. I told him I would find a way to make it happen. The next 5 years nearly broke me. I sold my truck, the one I had owned since my hauling days. It was old and rusted, but I loved that truck. It represented freedom to me, the open road, the possibility of going anywhere. But Daniel's future was worth more than my nostalgia. I took on a second job as a night security guard at a warehouse across town. I would finish my shift at the steel mill at 6 in the evening, come home for a quick dinner with Margaret and Daniel, then head out again for the overnight shift. Most nights I got maybe 4 hours of sleep. Margaret went back to work too. She took a job at a laundromat 3 blocks from our house. She would come home with her hands red and chapped from the soap and water, but she never complained. We were in this together, she always said. We were building something. Those 4 years of Daniel's college felt like a marathon with no finish line in sight. But we made it. We paid every tuition bill, every dorm fee, every textbook cost. We made it work because giving up was never an option. And when Daniel graduated with honors, a degree in finance clutched in his hands, Margaret and I stood in that auditorium and cried like we had never cried before. I wore the only suit I owned, a brown one I had bought secondhand for our wedding. It was out of style and a little too tight across the shoulders now. But I did not care. I watched my son walk across that stage, and I knew that every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every aching muscle had been worth it. Daniel was going to have the life I never had. He was going to be somebody, and I believed with all my heart that this was only the beginning. Daniel moved to Chicago right after graduation. A big investment firm had recruited him straight out of college, offering him a starting salary that was more than I made in 2 years at the steel mill. I was proud of him. So proud, it almost hurt. The first year, Daniel called home every week. He would tell us about his apartment, his co-workers, the restaurants he was discovering in the city. Margaret would put him on speakerphone so we could both listen, and we would sit at the kitchen table smiling at each other like we had won some kind of lottery. The second year, the calls became less frequent, once every 2 weeks, then once a month. Daniel was busy, he said. The job was demanding. He was working 80-hour weeks trying to prove himself. I understood. I had been young and ambitious once too. I told Margaret not to worry. Then Daniel met Karen. He brought her home on a weekend visit, the first time we had seen him in person in almost a year. I remember standing on the porch watching them pull up in a sleek black car that probably cost more than our house. Daniel looked different. His clothes were expensive, tailored in ways I did not understand. His hair was styled with some kind of product that made it shine. And Karen stepped out of that car like she was descending from a throne. She was beautiful, I will give her that. Tall and slender, with blonde hair that fell in perfect waves around her shoulders. Her clothes looked like something from a magazine, but it was her eyes that I noticed most. They were the color of pale green sea glass, and they swept over our little house on Maple Street with an expression I could not quite read. Disappointment, maybe, or judgment. Margaret had spent 2 days cleaning and preparing for this visit. She had made Daniel's favorite pot roast, baked an apple pie from scratch, put fresh flowers on the table. She was so nervous about making a good impression. Karen was polite during dinner. She said all the right things, complimented the food, smiled at the appropriate moments. But I caught her glancing at the chipped plates we ate from the faded curtains, the old linoleum floor in the kitchen. I saw her subtly wipe her fork with her napkin before eating, like she suspected our dishes were not clean enough. After they left, Margaret asked me what I thought of her. I told her that Daniel seemed happy, and that was what mattered. But in my heart, I felt a small seed of worry take root. The wedding came a year later. Karen's parents insisted on planning everything. The ceremony was held at a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago, the kind of place that had crystal chandeliers and marble floors and waiters in white gloves. Margaret and I felt like foreigners there. We did not know what fork to use at dinner. We did not recognize the names of the wines being poured. Karen's parents, Richard and Caroline, greeted us with the kind of courtesy you might show to distant relatives you would rather forget existed. They introduced us to their friends as Daniel's family from Ohio, and something about the way they said it made it sound like we came from another planet. During the reception, I watched my son work the room. He laughed at jokes I did not understand, spoke about investments and portfolios and market trends. He was fluent in a language I had never learned. Somewhere along the way, my Daniel had become a stranger. I tried to talk to him that night during a quiet moment near the bar. I asked him if he was happy, if this was really what he wanted. He looked at me with something like pity in his eyes. "Dad, this is my life now," he said. "I know it's different from what you're used to. But Karen's family, they've opened doors for me. I can't explain it, but this is where I belong." I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell him that he would always belong with us, with his family, with the people who had sacrificed everything for him. But the words stuck in my throat, and before I could find them, Karen appeared at his elbow, pulling him away to meet another guest. After the wedding, the phone calls became even rarer. Once a month became once every few months. When I called Daniel, he was always busy, meeting with clients, traveling for work, attending social events with Karen's family. He promised he would visit soon, but soon never seemed to come. Margaret missed him terribly. Some nights I would find her sitting in Daniel's old room, looking through photo albums from when he was a boy. She never said it out loud, but I knew she felt like she was losing her son inch by inch. Then 5 years after the wedding, Margaret got sick. It started with a cough that would not go away. She blamed it on allergies, then a cold, then the change of seasons. But the cough got worse and she started losing weight, and finally I made her go to the doctor. Lung cancer. Stage 3. I still remember the moment the doctor said those words. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Margaret reached for my hand, and her fingers were trembling, but her voice was steady when she asked how much time she had. The doctor said maybe a year, maybe less. I called Daniel that night. I told him his mother was dying. I told him we needed him to come home. He said he would try. Over the next 8 months, I watched the woman I loved fade away before my eyes. Margaret, who had always been so strong, so full of life, became fragile and thin. She spent more and more time in bed. I took early retirement from the mill so I could be with her every moment. I learned how to cook the meals she used to make, though they never tasted quite right. I learned how to change her sheets without disturbing her. I learned how to hold back my tears until I was alone in the bathroom, where she could not hear me fall apart. Daniel visited 3 times during those 8 months. 3 times in 8 months while his mother was dying. The first visit he stayed for 2 days. Karen came with him, but she spent most of the time on her phone or complaining about the slow internet in our house. The second visit, Daniel came alone, but he was distracted constantly checking his work emails. The third visit was at the end. Margaret passed away on a Tuesday night in February. The hospice nurse had warned me it was coming. I held Margaret's hand as her breathing slowed, as the gaps between each breath grew longer. I told her I loved her. I told her she was the best thing that had ever happened to me. I thanked her for 40 years of partnership, of laughter, of building a life together from nothing. She squeezed my hand one last time, and then she was gone. Daniel and Karen arrived the next morning for the funeral. Karen wore a black dress that probably cost more than all my suits combined. She checked her watch throughout the service. As soon as the last prayer was said, she whispered something to Daniel about needing to get back for a charity event she was hosting. They left before the reception was over. I stood at Margaret's grave after everyone else had gone, and I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my entire life. The house was so empty without her. I wandered from room to room like a ghost, touching the things she had touched, smelling the sweaters she used to wear. Some nights I would wake up reaching for her, and the cold sheets beside me would remind me all over again that she was gone. Daniel called once a week at first, then every 2 weeks, then once a month. I told myself he was grieving in his own way. I told myself he was busy with his important job and his important life. I made excuses for my son because the alternative, accepting that he had simply moved on without me, was too painful to consider. 2 years passed this way. 2 years of quiet grief and empty days. 2 years of waiting by the phone for calls that rarely came. And then one evening, Daniel called with news that changed everything. The phone rang on a Thursday evening in late October. I was sitting in the living room, the television on, but muted, just watching the light flicker across the walls. When I saw Daniel's name on the caller ID, my heart lifted the way it always did. But something was different about his voice that night. There was an urgency I had not heard before, a tightness that made my stomach clench. "Dad, I have news," Daniel said. "Karen just had the baby. A little girl. We named her Emma." I felt tears prick my eyes. A grandchild. Margaret would have been so happy. That's wonderful, son, I managed to say. Congratulations. I can't wait to meet her. There was a pause on the other end of the line. In the background, I could hear Karen's voice saying something I could not quite make out. Actually, Dad, that's why I'm calling, Daniel said. Karen and I have been talking, and we think it would be good if you came to live with us, here in Chicago. I was stunned. After 2 years of distance, suddenly my son wanted me close. We could use the help, Daniel continued. With the baby, I mean. Karen's going back to work in a few months, and we need someone we can trust to watch Emma. And you're all alone in that big house. It makes sense, doesn't it? In the background, I heard Karen's voice again, sharper this time. Tell him we need help with the baby, not a guest. Daniel coughed and quickly spoke over her words. The whole family wants you here, Dad. What do you say? I should have listened to that voice in the back of my mind, the one that whispered warning. I should have paid attention to the way Karen spoke about me like I was a problem to be managed rather than a person to be welcomed. But I was lonely. God, I was so lonely. The house on Maple Street had become a museum of memories, every corner filled with ghosts of Margaret, of Daniel, as a child of a life that no longer existed. The chance to be close to my son, to hold my grandchild, to feel like part of a family again. It was everything I had been dreaming about since Margaret passed. I'll do it, I told Daniel. I'll sell the house and come to Chicago. The house sold in 6 weeks. 35 years of my life, and it was gone with a signature on a piece of paper. $180,000, which I deposited in my savings account. I kept $30,000 in checking for moving expenses and emergencies. The rest, $150,000, I thought would be my security for whatever years I had left. I packed what I could into the back of a rental truck. Most of our furniture I sold or donated. The dining table where we had shared thousands of meals. The bed where Margaret had taken her last breath. The rocking chair where I had held Daniel as a baby. Some things I kept. Margaret's wedding ring, which I wore on a chain around my neck. A photo album from our early years together. Her favorite blue scarf, the one that still smelled faintly of her perfume. Daniel's baby blanket, soft and faded after 40 years. I drove to Chicago on a cold December morning. The highway stretched out before me, endless and gray, and with each mile, I felt the weight of my old life falling away behind me. Daniel and Karen's house was in a wealthy suburb north of the city. As I pulled up the long driveway, I stared at the sprawling structure before me. It was not a house. It was a mansion. 3 stories tall, white columns framing the entrance, perfectly manicured lawn despite the winter frost. This was my son's home. This was where my grandchild was growing up. Daniel met me at the door with a handshake that felt formal, almost businesslike. Karen stood behind him, holding Emma in her arms. The baby was beautiful, with wide blue eyes and a wisp of dark hair. My heart swelled at the sight of her. May I hold her? I asked, reaching out my trembling hands. Karen hesitated, glancing at Daniel. Something passed between them, a silent conversation I was not invited to join. Then Karen stepped forward and placed Emma in my arms. The baby looked up at me, and her tiny face broke into a toothless smile. In that moment, every sacrifice felt worth it. Every mile I had traveled, every memory I had left behind. This was my family. This was where I belonged. Or so I thought. Daniel showed me to my room. It was on the ground floor near the back of the house, a small space barely larger than a closet, with a single window that looked out onto the garage. The walls were bare, painted an institutional beige. This is the room near the laundry, I observed, trying to keep my voice neutral. The guest rooms upstairs are for actual guests. Karen said from the doorway. She had followed us without me noticing. You'll be more comfortable down here anyway. Closer to the kitchen, easier for you to get around. There was something in her tone, a dismissive edge that made me feel small. But I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself she was just tired from having a newborn. I unpacked my bags and tried to settle into my new life. It did not take long to understand what that life would look like. Within a week, the pattern became clear. I was not here as a beloved father and grandfather. I was here as free labor. I woke at 5 o'clock every morning to prepare Emma's bottles. I changed her diapers, rocked her to sleep, walked the floors with her at 3 in the morning, when she would not stop crying. Daniel and Karen slept peacefully upstairs in their soundproofed master suite, undisturbed by their daughter's needs. During the day, I cleaned. I did laundry. I cooked meals that Karen criticized for being too simple, too heavy, too unlike what she was used to. I scrubbed floors that were already spotless, organized closets that did not need organizing, performed whatever tasks Karen assigned me each morning, with her clipped, impatient voice. I was 65 years old. My back ached from years of hard labor. My knees had started to give me trouble. But I pushed through the pain because complaining seemed ungrateful. I was living in my son's beautiful home. I was spending time with my granddaughter. What right did I have to complain? Karen hired a housekeeper, a young woman named Maria, who came 3 times a week. But Maria's job was only to clean the rooms. Karen used the living room, where she entertained friends, the master bedroom, the formal dining room. The rest of the house, including my small room and the nursery, was my responsibility. I told myself this was temporary. I told myself that once I proved my worth, things would change. Karen would see that I was family, not staff. Daniel would remember that I was his father, not an employee. But weeks turned into months, and nothing changed. The seasons shifted outside the window of my small room. Winter melted into spring, spring bloomed into summer, and I marked the passage of time by watching Emma grow. She learned to roll over, then to sit up, then to crawl across the floor with determination in her eyes. Each milestone felt like a gift, a reminder of why I had left everything behind. But inside that beautiful house, the atmosphere grew colder with each passing day. Karen's rules multiplied like weeds in an untended garden. At first they seemed reasonable. Do not enter the formal living room when guests were present. Use the smaller bathroom near the laundry instead of the guest bathroom upstairs. Take meals in the kitchen instead of the dining room when the family was eating together. I obeyed without complaint. I was a guest here, I reminded myself. It was Karen's home. She had the right to run it as she saw fit. Then the rules became harder to accept. One evening, Karen hosted a dinner party for her book club. I had spent all afternoon preparing appetizers according to her instructions, cutting vegetables into precise shapes, arranging cheese on platters, making sure everything was perfect. When the doorbell rang, announcing the first guests, Karen pulled me aside. "Stay in your room tonight," she said. It was not a request. "I don't want you wandering around while my friends are here. It makes people uncomfortable." I felt the words like a slap. Uncomfortable. My presence in my son's home made people uncomfortable. I retreated to my room and listened to laughter and conversation drifting through the walls. At one point, I heard someone ask about the nursery, and Karen replied that her father-in-law was watching the baby in his room. The way she said it, with that subtle emphasis on his room, made it clear I was being kept out of sight, like a piece of furniture that did not match the decor. I tried to talk to Daniel about it. I waited until a Saturday morning when Karen had taken Emma to a mommy and me class, and I found him alone in the kitchen. "Son, I'm worried about how things are going here," I said, choosing my words carefully. I feel like Karen and I have gotten off on the wrong foot. Maybe if we could all sit down together and talk." Daniel did not look up from his phone. "Dad, you know how Karen is. She's particular about things. Just try to stay out of her way and everything will be fine." "But I feel like a stranger in this house," I pressed. "Like I'm not welcome in my own son's home." Finally, Daniel met my eyes. There was something in his expression I did not recognize. Impatience, maybe, or embarrassment. "Look, Dad, I appreciate everything you're doing for us. Really. But Karen's family, they're different from ours. They have certain expectations. I need you to understand that and try to fit in. Can you do that for me?" I wanted to ask him what had happened to the boy I raised. The boy who used to sit on my lap and tell me I was his hero. The boy who promised he would make me proud. Instead, I just nodded and walked away. 2 years passed in this fashion. 2 years of invisible servitude, of swallowed pride, of watching my son slowly disappear into a version of himself I did not know. My body began to show the strain. The arthritis in my knees worsened until climbing stairs became an exercise in agony. My lower back, damaged from decades of physical labor, sent shooting pains down my legs if I stood for too long. Some mornings it took me 10 minutes just to get out of bed. One night I slipped in the bathroom. My feet went out from under me on the wet tile, and I went down hard, cracking my shoulder against the edge of the sink. I lay there on the cold floor for nearly 20 minutes, unable to get up, listening to the silence of the house around me. No one came. No one heard. No one knew. When I finally managed to pull myself up, I looked in the mirror and saw an old man I barely recognized. Gray skin, sunken eyes, a purple bruise already forming on my shoulder. I was 66 years old, and I felt every single day of it. I did not tell anyone about the fall. What would be the point? Karen would only see it as proof that I was becoming a burden. Daniel would tell me to be more careful and go back to his phone. Instead, I started hiding my pain. I took aspirin before breakfast to dull the aches. I moved more slowly, more carefully. I learned to grip the railing when I walked, to lower myself into chairs instead of sitting, to mask the grimaces that crossed my face when my joints screamed in protest. Around this time, Karen began to mention my savings. It started subtly. Casual comments about how expensive property taxes had become, how the new roof had cost more than expected, how preschools in the area were charging astronomical fees. She would drop these observations into conversation, like seeds, then watch to see if they took root. One evening after dinner, she approached me directly. "Julius, Daniel and I have been talking," she said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "We're facing some unexpected financial pressures. The market has been volatile and Daniel's bonus was smaller than anticipated this year. I was hoping you might be able to help out. Just temporarily, of course." I looked at my son, who was studying his plate with intense concentration. "How much do you need?" I asked. Karen named a figure, $50,000. My heart sank. That was a third of my savings money I had set aside for my own security. But Daniel still would not meet my eyes, and Karen was watching me with an expression that made clear this was not really a request. "I'll transfer it tomorrow," I said. 6 months later, Karen came to me again. This time it was $40,000 for Emma's private preschool tuition. The best school in the area, she explained. They could not possibly send Emma anywhere else. It would affect her entire future. I handed over the money without argument. My savings dwindled from $150,000 to $60,000. I tried not to think about what would happen if I needed medical care, if I could no longer work, if Daniel and Karen decided they no longer wanted me around. But I think part of me already knew Part of me had known since the first night Karen sent me to eat alone in my room while her guests laughed in the dining room above. I was not family to her. I was a resource to be used until I was depleted. And I was almost depleted now. The isolation crept in so gradually, I almost did not notice it at first. But by my second year in that house, I realized I had become invisible to the world outside. Karen had quietly poisoned the well with the neighbors. I learned this by accident when I was picking up the morning paper, and the woman next door hurried past without making eye contact. Later, I overheard Karen on the phone with another neighbor. "He gets confused sometimes," Karen was saying. "Early dementia, probably. We're keeping an eye on him, but you know how it is. If he says anything strange, just smile and nod." I was not confused. My mind was as sharp as it had ever been. But Karen had created a narrative, and there was no one to contradict it. She took away my ability to leave the house. First, it was small things. The car keys moved to a hook I could not reach. Then she suggested I stop driving altogether for safety reasons. Before I knew it, I was stranded in that beautiful prison, dependent on Karen for every trip outside. I did not have a cell phone. There was a landline in the kitchen, but Karen always seemed to be nearby when I tried to use it. I felt her listening, monitoring, controlling. Old friends from Ohio stopped calling. I had given them Daniel's address, but the letters I wrote never seemed to reach them. I wondered if Karen was intercepting my mail, but I had no way to prove it. The loneliest moment came on a Thursday evening in December, almost exactly 2 years after I had arrived. Karen's parents were visiting for an early holiday celebration. Her mother's birthday, or perhaps a work achievement her father wanted to celebrate. The house was full of people, laughter, the smell of expensive catered food. I was upstairs watching Emma while the party happened below. Karen had made it clear I was not to come down. "Mother doesn't like the baby crying during dinner," she had explained, as if this justified banishing us both. Emma fell asleep around 7. I sat in the rocking chair in the nursery listening to the muffled sounds of joy from downstairs. The clink of glasses, a toast being made, applause. I thought about Margaret. I wondered what she would say if she could see me now. I imagined her standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, that look on her face she used to get when she was ready to fight for something. "Julius," she would say, "what on earth are you doing here?" And I realized, sitting in that dark nursery with my sleeping granddaughter, that I did not have an answer. The breaking point came on a warm evening in early June, nearly 3 years after I had moved to Chicago. Karen was hosting her mother's 65th birthday party. The house was transformed for the occasion, fresh flowers everywhere, a string quartet playing in the corner, servers circulating with champagne and canapes. I had been given strict instructions. "Watch Emma upstairs. Do not come down until the party was over. Do not let the baby cry." But Emma had other plans. She was 18 months old now, walking and talking and full of opinions about the world. That night she refused to sleep. She wanted her mother. She wanted to see the pretty lights downstairs. She wanted, with the intensity only a toddler can muster, to be part of the celebration. After 2 hours of struggling, I made a decision. I would carry Emma down to the kitchen, warm some milk, and bring her back up. It would take 5 minutes. No one would even notice. I crept down the back stairs, Emma in my arms, her whimpering muffled against my shoulder. The kitchen was supposed to be empty, but when I rounded the corner, I found Karen standing at the counter, refilling a pitcher of water. She turned and saw me. Her face went from surprise to fury in a heartbeat. "What are you doing down here?" she hissed. Emma wouldn't settle. "I just needed to warm some." "I don't care what you needed. You were told to stay upstairs. My mother's friends are here. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" I looked down at my clothes. I was wearing clean slacks and a button-down shirt. My hair was combed. I did not understand what there was to be embarrassed about. "Karen, You look like a homeless person," she snapped. "Wandering around my house in the middle of a party carrying my daughter like some kind of refugee. Go back upstairs. Now." Emma started to cry at the sharpness in her mother's voice. I bounced her gently, trying to soothe her, trying to process the words that had just been spoken. Like a homeless person, in my own son's house. After everything I had given. Karen snatched Emma from my arms and thrust the crying child at a server who happened to walk in. "Take her to the nanny," she ordered. Then she turned back to me. "Go to your room, Julius. We'll discuss this later." I went. I walked back up those stairs like a beaten dog, closed the door to my little room near the laundry, and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. For the first time since Margaret died, I let myself truly weep. 6 months after the birthday party incident, Daniel started complaining about headaches. At first, he blamed work stress. The markets had been volatile. His team was understaffed. He was sleeping poorly and drinking too much coffee. Karen encouraged him to take some time off, maybe visit a spa, but Daniel insisted he was fine. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in January, Daniel collapsed at his desk. His assistant called an ambulance. Karen called me from the hospital, her voice strange and flat. "It's Daniel. Something's wrong. Get here now." I do not remember the cab ride to the hospital. I do not remember walking through those sterile hallways or finding the waiting room where Karen sat alone, her face pale, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The doctor came out an hour later. He used words I did not fully understand at first. Glioblastoma, stage 4, aggressive, inoperable, brain cancer. My son had brain cancer. The prognosis was 6 months at most. The weeks that followed exist in my memory as a blur of hospital rooms and hushed conversations and the steady beep of machines. Daniel underwent radiation and chemotherapy treatments that bought time but could not buy a cure. His hair fell out. His face grew gaunt. The strong, successful man he had become withered back into the child I had carried in my arms 42 years ago. I stayed by his bedside as much as Karen would allow. I read to him when he was too tired to speak. I held his hand when the pain became too much. I told him stories about his childhood, about Margaret, about the small house on Maple Street, where we had been happy despite having so little. Karen drifted in and out. She handled the medical decisions, the insurance paperwork, the logistics of dying. But the intimate work, the sitting and waiting and watching, she left to me. In those final weeks, something shifted in Daniel. The pretenses fell away. The important job, the fancy house, the wealthy wife with her rules and expectations. None of it mattered anymore. What mattered was the time we had left. One night when the nurses had finished their rounds and the hallway outside had grown quiet, Daniel reached for my hand. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was hoarse, barely audible. "I'm sorry." I leaned closer. "What for, son?" "For everything. For the way Karen treated you. For not standing up for you. For becoming someone you couldn't recognize." Tears slipped down his hollow cheeks. I was so afraid of losing what I had that I forgot what really mattered. I squeezed his hand, my own tears falling freely. "You're my son, Daniel. Nothing else matters. It matters to me." He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering strength. "I've done something, Dad. Something Karen doesn't know about. I met with a lawyer last month when I could still get around. I changed my will." I started to speak to tell him he did not need to worry about such things, but he continued. "I left you 40% of everything. There's a house, too, a small bungalow I bought as an investment years ago. It's yours now. Karen can't touch it. Daniel, you don't have to. Yes, I do. His eyes opened, and for a moment I saw my Daniel in there. The boy who used to sit on my lap. The teenager who told me I was his hero. The son I had sacrificed everything for. There's a letter, too. In my desk at home, the bottom left drawer. Read it after I'm gone. Promise me. I promise. And Dad. His grip tightened on my hand. Don't let Karen win. Whatever she says or does after I'm gone, remember that you deserve better. You deserve to be happy. Those were among the last coherent words my son ever spoke to me. 3 days later, I was dozing in the chair beside his bed when the change came. That subtle shift in breathing, the lengthening silence between each breath. I had heard it before with Margaret. I knew what it meant. I took Daniel's hand in mine. I told him his mother was waiting for him. I told him it was okay to let go. Karen arrived just before the end. She stood on the other side of the bed, watching with an expression I could not read. And then, as the first light of dawn crept through the hospital window, Daniel took his last breath. My son was gone. The next 3 days passed in a fog of grief and funeral preparations. I moved through the rituals on autopilot, shaking hands with people I did not know, accepting condolences I could barely hear. The funeral was held at a grand church Karen had selected, filled with hundreds of people from Daniel's professional and social circles. Most of them had never met me. They did not know about the small house on Maple Street, or the truck I had sold to pay for college, or the nights I had spent reading stories to a boy who dreamed of becoming someone important. I stood beside Daniel's casket as the service ended, unable to tear myself away. My body shook with sobs I could not control. 42 years of hopes and dreams and sacrifice, and this is where it had led. A mahogany box in a room full of strangers. Then Karen appeared beside me. Her face was dry. Her voice was ice. "Stop crying," she said. "You've made enough of a scene. Pack your bags and get out of my house. Today. I want you gone before I get back from the reception." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. I looked up, searching her face for some sign of humanity, some recognition that she was speaking to a grieving father at his own son's funeral. There was nothing. Just cold, calculated dismissal. Behind her, I saw her parents watching. Her father nodded slightly as if approving of her words. No one spoke in my defense. No one stepped forward to say this was wrong. Then Emma, my beautiful 3-year-old granddaughter, broke free from her nanny and ran to me. She wrapped her small arms around my leg and looked up with tear-filled eyes. "Grandpa, why are you crying?" Karen reached down and pulled Emma away. "Come on, sweetie. Grandpa has to go now." I watched them walk away, my granddaughter glancing back at me with confusion on her little face. And something inside me finally broke. But it was not the breaking of defeat. It was the breaking of chains. I looked down at Daniel's casket one last time. I thought about his words in the hospital. The will, the house, the letter. Don't let Karen win. Then I straightened my spine, wiped my eyes, and walked out of that church. I was not running away. I was finally walking toward the man I should have been all along. I returned to the house before Karen and her family. I had perhaps 2 hours before they finished the reception and came back. 2 hours to find what Daniel had left me and reclaim whatever remained of my dignity. My first stop was Daniel's home office. The room was pristine, every book perfectly aligned on the shelves, every pen in its designated holder. This had been Karen's domain as much as Daniel's. She came in here often to use the computer to review the finances to make sure everything was in order. but the bottom left drawer of Daniel's desk she had never thought to check. I knelt down my old knees, protesting, and pulled the drawer open. Inside, beneath a stack of old magazines that looked like they had not been touched in years, I found two items. The first was a letter in a sealed envelope, my name written on the front in Daniel's handwriting. The script was shaky, written during his illness, but unmistakably his. The second was a large brown envelope, the kind lawyers use for important documents. I sat down in Daniel's leather chair and opened the letter first. "Dad," Daniel had written. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably alone in this house for the last time. I need you to know some things before you leave. First, I'm sorry. I've said it before, but it's not enough. I can never say it enough. The way I let Karen treat you, the things I watched her do and said nothing about, they haunt me. They will haunt me until my last breath, and probably beyond. Karen married me for what I represented, not who I was. I knew it even then, but I was too weak to admit it. I was so desperate to belong to her world that I was willing to sacrifice the only person who had ever truly loved me unconditionally. You, Dad. I sacrificed you. She is going to try to take everything. She probably already has plans. The house, the investments, even Emma. She will use lawyers and courts and every dirty trick she knows to make sure you walk away with nothing. But I've outsmarted her. For once in my life, I did something brave. I met with a lawyer named Harrison. Not the family lawyer Karen knows about, someone new. Someone she has never heard of. He helped me draw up a new will, one that protects you. You're getting 40% of everything, Dad. And there's a house, a bungalow I bought 3 years ago as an investment. It's small, but it's paid off, and it's yours now. Karen doesn't even know it exists. I made sure of that. There's more. I recorded conversations. I kept copies of documents. Everything Karen said about you. Everything she planned, it's documented. Mr. Harrison has it all. If she tries to contest the will, if she tries to claim you manipulated me while I was sick, there's enough evidence to destroy her case and expose her cruelty. I'm not asking you to fight her, Dad. That's your choice. But I want you to have the weapons just in case. Finally, there's Emma. I know Karen will try to keep her from you, but I've made you the co-trustee of Emma's trust fund. That means you have legal standing rights she can't just dismiss. Mr. Harrison will explain. Dad, I don't have much time left. My head hurts, and my hands are shaking, and I can barely see the page anymore. But I need you to know one more thing. You were the best father anyone could ask for. Everything good in me came from you. And whatever mistakes I made, whatever wrong turns I took along the way, I never stopped loving you. Not for one single day. Take care of yourself. Find some happiness. You deserve it more than anyone I know. Your loving son, Daniel. I sat in that chair for a long time after I finished reading the letter, pressed against my chest, tears streaming down my face. My son. My Daniel. Even at the end, he had been thinking of me. Eventually, I opened the brown envelope. Inside was a copy of the will Daniel had described, along with a business card for Mr. Benjamin Harrison, attorney at law. I picked up the phone and dialed the number. Mr. Harrison answered on the third ring. His voice was calm and professional as he confirmed everything Daniel had told me. The will was valid. The bungalow was mine. My rights as co-trustee of Emma's trust were legally binding. He had copies of all the documentation Daniel had gathered, recordings and emails and text messages that painted a damning picture of Karen's treatment of me. Your son was very thorough, Harrison said. He wanted to make sure you were protected. I thanked him and scheduled a meeting for the following day. Then I packed my belongings. It did not take long. I had arrived in Chicago with 2 suitcases and a few boxes of memories. I was leaving with even less. Just my clothes, Margaret's scarf and ring, the photo album, and Daniel's letter. I left the house before Karen returned. I did not look back. A week later, the will was officially read. I was not present, but Harrison told me about it afterward. Karen had expected to inherit everything. When she learned that 40% of the estate was going to me, including a house she had never heard of, she reportedly turned white with fury. Her phone call came that same evening. "You manipulated my dying husband," she screamed into the phone. "You waited until he was sick and vulnerable, and you twisted his mind against me. I will destroy you in court. I will take back every penny. You will die alone and penniless." I let her finish. Then I spoke, and my voice was steady in a way it had not been in years. "Karen, I did nothing. Daniel made his own choices. For the first time in a long time, he was thinking clearly. And so am I. You think you can fight me? Do you know who my family is? We have lawyers who will tear you apart. Your lawyers can try. But you should know, Karen, that Daniel left me more than money. He left me everything. Letters, recordings, documentation of every cruel thing you said and did to me in that house. He kept it all." Silence on the other end of the line. "If you take me to court," I continued, "all of it becomes public record. Your friends will know. Your social circle will know. Everyone will see exactly who you really are." More silence. I could almost hear her calculating, weighing the risks. "This isn't over," she finally said, but her voice had lost its edge. "Actually, Karen, it is. I'm not going to fight you for more than Daniel gave me. I don't want your money or your house. I just want to live in peace, and I want to see my granddaughter. Emma is none of your business. That's where you're wrong. I'm the co-trustee of her trust. That gives me legal rights. Harrison has already filed the paperwork to ensure I have regular visitation. You can fight it if you want, but you'll lose, and you'll humiliate yourself in the process." I heard her breath catch. She was not used to being outmaneuvered. "I'm going to hang up now," I said. "And I hope for Emma's sake that you find a way to be a better person than you've been to me. Because someday she's going to grow up and see you clearly. And when that day comes, I hope she still finds something to love." I ended the call before she could respond. True to my word, I did not fight for more than Daniel had given me. But I did not let Karen take what was rightfully mine either. The bungalow Daniel had left me was in a quiet suburb about an hour outside Chicago. It was small, just 2 bedrooms and a modest yard, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. White siding, a red front door, a porch just big enough for 2 rocking chairs. It was nothing like the mansion I had left behind. It was better. I moved in on a rainy morning in March. As I carried my boxes through the front door, I felt something I had not felt in years. Hope. The first months in my new home were not easy. Grief does not follow a schedule. It arrives unannounced, triggered by the smallest things. The smell of coffee brewing reminded me of mornings with Margaret. A children's song on the radio brought back memories of Daniel as a baby. Some nights I would wake in the darkness, reaching for a hand that was no longer there, and the emptiness would feel like a physical weight on my chest. I allowed myself to feel it. I had spent so many years suppressing my pain, hiding my tears, pretending I was fine when I was breaking inside. Now, in the quiet of my own home, I gave myself permission to grieve. I cried for Margaret for the 40 years we had shared, and the decades we would never have. I cried for Daniel for the son he had been, and the man he had become, and the father he would never get to be. I cried for myself for the years I had wasted trying to earn the love of people who saw me as nothing more than a servant. But slowly, gradually, the crying became less frequent. The darkness lifted, revealing a world that was still turning, still full of possibility. I started going outside. At first it was just walks around the block. The neighborhood was quiet and friendly, full of older houses with well-tended gardens. People waved from their porches. Dogs barked greetings from behind fences. Children rode bicycles down the sidewalk, their laughter floating on the breeze. One morning, I met Dorothy. She was working in her garden a few houses down from mine, wearing a floppy sun hat and gloves covered in dirt. She looked up as I passed and smiled. "New to the neighborhood," she called out. I stopped. "Just moved in last month. Julius?" "Dorothy." She pulled off one glove and extended her hand. Her grip was firm, her palm warm. "Welcome to Maplewood Lane, best kept secret in the suburbs." We talked for nearly an hour that first morning. Dorothy was 63, a retired nurse widowed 5 years ago, when her husband of 40 years passed from a heart attack. She had 2 grown daughters who lived out of state and visited when they could. She spent her days gardening, reading, and volunteering at the local food bank. "Life goes on," she told me with a gentle smile. "Even when you think it won't. Even when you're sure you can't take another step. It goes on, and eventually you find yourself going on with it." I saw Dorothy nearly every day after that. We would walk together in the mornings, slow loops around the neighborhood, while the world woke up around us. We shared meals, sometimes at my place, sometimes at hers. We discovered that we both loved old movies and crossword puzzles, and arguing about whether the Cubs or the White Sox were the better team. She was not Margaret. No one would ever be Margaret. But Dorothy understood loss in a way that most people could not. She knew when to talk and when to simply sit in companionable silence. She did not try to fix me or rush my healing or tell me to move on before I was ready. She just let me be, and in that permission, I found a kind of peace I had not known was possible. Meanwhile, my relationship with Emma blossomed. The court had granted me visitation rights 1 weekend per month and alternating holidays. Karen fought it at first, but her lawyers must have advised her against a prolonged battle. She knew what evidence existed, what could be revealed if things went to trial. The first visit was awkward. Emma arrived at my door holding her nanny's hand, looking around at my modest home with confusion in her eyes. She was used to marble floors and crystal chandeliers. My living room with its second-hand furniture and crocheted throws must have seemed like another planet. But children are adaptable. Within an hour, Emma had forgotten about chandeliers. We built a fort out of couch cushions. We made cookies in the kitchen, getting flour everywhere. We walked to the park at the end of the street and fed the ducks in the little pond. When it was time for her to go home, Emma wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "I love Grandpa's little house." Each visit after that grew easier, more natural. I told Emma stories about her father as a boy, about her grandmother Margaret, who had loved her without ever meeting her. I taught her how to plant seeds in the garden, how to check for ripe tomatoes, how to tell the difference between a weed and a flower. Karen remained cold whenever we crossed paths during pickups and drop-offs. She barely looked at me, spoke in monosyllables, radiated contempt from every pore. But I no longer cared what Karen thought of me. Her opinion had lost its power the moment I walked out of that church. What mattered was Emma. What mattered was the joy on her face when she saw me waiting on the porch. What mattered was the legacy of love I could pass on, the same love my parents had given me, the same love I had given Daniel. The cycle continued unbroken. Time passed. The seasons turned. My garden grew. My heart healed. I joined a grief support group at the community center, a circle of people who had all lost someone they loved. We met every Thursday evening, sharing our stories, our tears, our small victories. I learned that healing was not a destination, but a journey, and that the journey was easier when you did not walk alone. I started writing. Nothing fancy, just a notebook where I recorded my memories. The day I met Margaret. The moment Daniel was born. Our struggles and triumphs, our ordinary days that seemed so unremarkable then and so precious now. I wrote for hours, sometimes the pen moving across the page as if guided by its own will. Dorothy suggested I turn it into a memoir. "Your grandchildren should know this story," she said, "and their children after them. These memories are a treasure, Julius. Don't let them disappear." I was not sure I had the skill for such a project, but I kept writing anyway, a page at a time, a memory at a time. It was not about creating a masterpiece. It was about bearing witness to a life, to the love that had shaped it, and the loss that had tested it, and the resilience that had carried it through. One evening, as summer faded into autumn, I sat on my porch with Dorothy, watching the sun set over the rooftops. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and gold, beautiful beyond description. "What are you thinking about?" Dorothy asked. I considered the question carefully. "I'm thinking about how strange life is. A year ago, I thought I had nothing left. I thought Karen had taken everything from me. My dignity, my purpose, my will to keep going. And now I realize she never had that power. Not really. I gave it to her by believing her lies about who I was and what I deserved. The moment I stopped believing, the moment I walked out of that church, I took it back." Dorothy nodded slowly. "That's the hardest lesson, isn't it? Learning that no one can diminish you without your permission." We sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky. I thought about Daniel, about the letter he had left me, about his final words in that hospital room. "Don't let Karen win." But it was never really about winning or losing. It was about choosing how to live with whatever time I had left. I had chosen peace over bitterness. I had chosen love over anger. I had chosen to walk forward instead of looking back. And in that choice, I had found something I thought I had lost forever. I had found myself. The story could end here, I suppose. An old man finds his footing after tragedy, rebuilds his life, learns to smile again. A happy ending, neat and tidy. But life is rarely neat or tidy. And the truth is, the journey does not really end. It continues day after day, one foot in front of the other. What I can tell you is this: I am 67 years old. I have loved and lost and loved again. I have sacrificed more than I can measure and received blessings I never thought possible. I have been broken and remade, diminished and restored, brought to my knees and lifted back to my feet. I walked away from my son's funeral with nothing but the clothes on my back and the weight of my grief. I walked into a future I could not see, trusting that something better was waiting, even when everything suggested otherwise. And here I am, not triumphant, not vindicated, just alive, just present, just grateful for another day to tend my garden, to visit with Dorothy, to hear Emma's laughter when she runs up my front walk. If there is one thing I have learned in 67 years, it is this: sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply to let go and keep walking. You let go of the expectations that were never yours to carry. You let go of the people who could not see your worth. You let go of the anger and resentment that poison your heart. And then you walk. You walk toward whatever comes next with your head held high and your heart open to possibility. That is what I did when Karen told me to pack my bags and get out. I walked away. And in walking away, I finally found my way home. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from people who did not value you? What gave you the strength to keep going? Drop your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and let me know. If you want to hear more stories about resilience, healing, and finding your way back to yourself, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Share this video with someone who might be going through a difficult time with family. Sometimes knowing we are not alone is the first step toward healing. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I am grateful for every single one of you. May you find the courage to walk toward your own peace wherever that journey takes you. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.